Hello, and welcome to our podcast. Today, we are going to be discussing the defense budget. My name is Christian, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Honam.
And I'm Olivia.
So there was an article recently published by The Guardian after the success of the Artemis II launch, which is a crazy follow-up. The Trump administration is trying to slash a quarter of NASA's budget, claiming that they can do more with less. It reduces their budget for 2026 from $24.4 billion to $18.8 billion, as well as a 47% cut to other science programs.
So how can we expect more successful, inspiring missions like Artemis II if we're currently slashing our government-funded space programs every year? How can we be the country to discover cures to diseases and make advanced scientific discoveries if we aren't allocating funds to these endeavors?
Yeah, think about it. Have you ever noticed that the government seems to have tons of money to spend on the military, but it never has enough for anything else?
Yeah, what? Billions? No, scratch that. Hundreds of billions every year go into the military, but then problems like underfunded schools, issue with public services like healthcare, or cuts to research are still running rampant around the country.
And these aren't small problems either. These are things people deal with every day. Not eating 3 meals a day, not having the money to, not having roofs over their heads, kids who go hungry at school because they don't have lunch money. When we allocate all of our money towards defense, we start missing out on research and social programs that solve these issues.
Exactly. It's like if the government were a family, then the defense sector would be like their favorite child.
So, in essence, this is what we're going to be talking about today. The idea that defense spending is something that it has become heavily prioritized, and how this prioritization comes at the cost of things like research, innovation, or other public programs.
The tricky part is that people usually just use these 2 lines of reasoning to justify spending from the government, or just spending in general. Does this keep us safe, and is it worth the money?
And that kind of reasoning comes up in other places too. It's usually when people talk about other big investments, like space exploration.
So to understand this imbalance, I kind of want to talk about how do we even evaluate government spending in the first place. There's an article by the academic researchers Basil Tucker and Hank Allewine that look specifically at space programs, but the idea applies way more broadly. Basically, their main argument is that people rely too heavily on something called cost-benefit analysis, which is asking, does the benefit outweigh the cost? If yes, it's worth it. If not, it's not. Sounds pretty simple and pretty logical on paper, but the issue is that it kind of only works for things you can actually measure in numbers.
So projects where you can clearly track financial return.
Pretty much, yeah. But space exploration doesn't really work like that. A lot of its benefits aren't immediate, and it's pretty hard to quantify. For example, let's say something like learning something cool about the universe. There's no clear dollar value attached to you learning something cool about the universe. Same thing goes with something like innovation. A lot of the technology we use today only exists because of research that didn't have obvious value at the time. It's more of an investment thing that we only see the benefits in the future.
Yeah, GPS, that started out as only military space-related technology.
Yeah, that's a really good example, actually. At the time, GPS probably didn't really look like something that would be useful in everyday life. The article also talks about things like national pride and inspiring the youth. For example, while the moon landing didn't just generate economic value, it also changed how people thought about space, science, and what things could actually be possible. These factors seem pretty meaningful, but they unfortunately go undetected in cost-benefit analysis.
So essentially, the argument is that we're just undervaluing these programs because we can't adequately measure their successes.
Exactly. So Tucker and Allewine were basically just suggesting a more broad framework. Instead of cost-benefit analysis, they say we should also consider things like public accountability, social impact, environmental risk, and stakeholder interest. By doing this, it becomes less of a financial calculation and more of a public policy decision.
Well, that makes sense though, because they're using public money, so it's only fair.
Yeah, the goal isn't just to make profit, but also create long-term value for society, whether this be inspiring the youth or making innovation that can hopefully benefit us more in the future.
So to build off that, I want to talk about what actually happens when the government stops prioritizing something like space travel. This comes from a case study I found by Damini Rana and Sharma Ritunjay. They're both student researchers from Delhi, India, and they start off by saying when it began in the 50s, the space race was pretty much only government run.
And that was all Cold War stuff?
Yeah, because the Soviets, they launched their first satellite, and then the U.S., they had the moon landing, and those were huge public investments. But now we have to think about more than just government agencies. Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, they've sprung up and they're becoming just as prominent.
Outside of just the recent Artemis 2 launch, there's less viability or media coverage of other projects that are handled by the government space companies like NASA. Why is that?
That shift didn't just happen. It's been happening over the past couple decades. Back in the 70s, private companies wanted to start getting involved in communication satellites. And that was seen as a small step. It wouldn't have a huge impact on most people. In fact, it made a lot of sense to them because they didn't want the government controlling their communications anyways.
So the government just let them take over?
They tried doing their own thing, but it didn't work forever. There was the space shuttle coming to an end after Challenger and Columbia crashes, and those made government space missions a lot riskier. And since 2004, NASA's basically only stepped in when they absolutely had to. They were pretty much the opposite of an industry leader when you look at it like that.
So basically, it just opened the door for a bunch of private companies. Actually, I'd like to add, one statistic from the welfare state that really stood up to me is that for every $16 the U.S. spends on military wars and war, only about $1 is spent on diplomacy or humanitarian aid or space-related stuff. I just found this statistic really interesting and how space and innovation is prioritized less.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy how the government doesn't really spend much attention on the kind of stuff like that. And that's what I'm getting at with these private companies. At the same time that technology was getting cheaper, smartphones were becoming a thing, and demand for satellites was increasing. So investors were just becoming more and more attracted to these space-based companies. And now it's gotten to the point where billionaires and their private companies like Musk and Bezos, they can afford to take over large parts of the industry on their own.
That makes perfect sense. Elon Musk's net worth is like 30 times bigger than NASA's budget.
Exactly, and they don't just want to participate and have a small role. They have huge dreams about space tourism, manufacturing, colonizing Mars. Bezos probably wants to make Space Amazon a thing eventually.
Yeah, so basically, now that big space is privatized, the only money that these space programs get goes towards satellites and manufacturing for these companies, opposed to missions such as Artemis 2.
Yeah, that's basically it. When the government forgets about something, it doesn't just go away, it gets taken over. And that can change things a lot because private companies aren't interested in the public good like governments are supposed to be. They exist for the purpose of making their shareholders richer, and that's their only goal.
Hey Brody, do you think the U.S. spends too much, too little, or the right amounts on defense?
The right amount.
Oh,
sure,
why is that, Brody?
Because defense is pretty important to keep our country safe, and also provides livelihoods for a lot of people, so like me.
Oh, I see. So, do you personally think that military spending takes money away from programs like healthcare or education?
I think kind of some of them could. It depends where that money is coming from. Definitely some of it probably is coming out of.
I see. Well, what about you, Alex? Alex, how important do you think?
I gotta do laundry.
How important do you think NASA and space exploration compared to military spending?
Wait, what?
How important do you think NASA and space exploration are compared to military spending?
Sorry, can you look at the question again? What's the question? How
important do you think NASA and space exploration are compared to military spending?
I think space exploration is probably more important Wait, what's your goal with the podcast?
There's no goal. Like it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like you actually like answer honestly.
Actually, okay. I think we should spend more on space exploration. No, never mind. I'm capping. I think it should be pretty like 50-50 split, because like there's a lot of benefits for space exploration, because it's like a bunch of more possibilities out there in space than we know on Earth. And the thing is, military is also important because like, well, we're at war. The thing is, like, current military technologies like nukes and stuff aren't too like crazy effective, because it's more like a threat.
I see.
And like people use like more like what's it called, electronic warfare? How do I put it? Yeah.
So do you think like things like healthcare, education, or like things of those are like also of national security too? Or do you think our current split is like pretty like ideal right now?
I think we could definitely put more into education and healthcare, because I mean, like, I know people in Canada, they got the healthcare for free, and then people in the US, we have to pay for our own healthcare. And additionally, like, teachers are also constantly like, and professors are constantly like going on strike because of their unequal pay, even though they're like teaching the next generation.
Oh, that's calm. All right.
I gotta go into the other people now.
That's interesting. It's really interesting, just like the juxtaposition between like what NASA was doing before these private companies took over, where it was just like America like trying to increase like patriotism and nationalism by just like doing all these interesting space exploration stuff. But now it's really just like more satellites for phones and stuff like that, just advancing technology, but not really in a way that's like putting us ahead of other countries for anything. We're still going to other countries to mine lithium for all these phones that we're making. But another thing that we should talk about, because we're talking about how we're putting all this money into the military, is just reasons that we do that. So we've talked about why we need to allocate government money towards the space industry instead of defense, but it's still really important to consider the benefits of a large defense budget. In a peer-reviewed article by Demetrius Demetrio, a professor of finance in the University of West Attica, this journal just described the importance of spending efficiency within a military budget. Your country can have a ginormous military budget, but it just won't benefit them nearly as much if they aren't spending efficiently, which is true for most things. Like, for example, like you can use that money on your defense budget to pay high salaries to all your soldiers and just have less high-tech weapons. Or more optimally, you can have less soldiers and more drones and other advanced technologies that you can be spending your money on.
And so most countries now are moving towards that high-tech model?
Yeah, and this breeds innovation as more countries develop these new technologies. This tech also, like we talked about before, will eventually bleed into civilian life. Like we talked about GPS, but also drones. Like there's a lot of non-defense use for drones now, whether it's hobbyist or like for marketing, like in real estate. There's also the aspect of arms trade, where countries produce weapons for export, so you can manufacture more parts for less when you're manufacturing not just for your country alone, and that helps our economy.
That's the economy of scale idea, yeah?
Yeah, so basically it's like this. So like if you're gonna bake just one cookie, you still have to soften your butter, you gotta mix all the batter together, you gotta scoop it out, make your cookie, and then bake it for an amount of time. And then at the end, you just have one cookie. But instead, you can maximize the least effort spent on the most products produced. So basically, instead of doing that, you can make 100 cookies with like slightly more effort. But basically, however, focusing too much on one area just creates trade-offs. So if you have more military spending, it almost always means less spending on social programs, healthcare, and education.
And that's really the problem. It's not just about military, it's about what gets pushed aside for the military.
Yeah, at the end of the day, every dollar spent in one area is a dollar that can't go somewhere else. And eventually that starts affecting like everyday people through like healthcare, schools, infrastructure, and research. I feel like this conversation always goes back to like priorities, because though we can like consistently increase military budgets, then theoretically we can also choose to increase funding for science or social programs too. Like the report I suggested like earlier is not really a question of possibility, but it's more of a question of like political priority and what we should prioritize.
Yeah, so this also creates issues. High-tech militaries create a job market only for highly educated and highly trained individuals and diminish the already existing one. Like the U.S. military right now is one of the biggest employers of people who don't choose to pursue a higher education. So, like with the incentive that after joining the military, they will have the resources to do so. But if we start moving towards this higher tech model, this will eventually mean less jobs for Americans and more jobs for highly educated Americans, while the tuition money for all colleges in America goes up and Americans have less and less access to loans to pursue higher degrees. Essentially, there are benefits to having a large military budget, but drawbacks when this money is spent inefficiently. Prioritizing defense over every other category just creates long-term consequences.
So all this to say that the government needs to get its priorities fixed. Have you guys heard about all those recent NSB firings?
Yeah, I have. It's like really interesting to me that we're choosing to move in this direction.
This is a pretty new topic to me, so I'm gonna need you to educate me real quick.
So for those of you who haven't heard, the government, the current admin of the government, fired all 22 National Science Board members. And it's, of course, under the guise of efficiency. The government has been really crazy about efficiency lately. But these board members are supposed to be the White House and Congress advisor on science policy. They're supposed to be the people they go to. And they've been around for a long time. And they also oversee the National Science Foundation, which drives national science policy, if you don't know. And you can only help but compare these cuts to the NSB to our huge defense budget, which is what we've been talking about for most of our time here. It's kind of crazy to see the contrast between what we decide to get rid of and what we decide to keep.
I agree. It's also just like really disheartening as people in college, because the NSB is who decides which colleges get funded to pursue what research. It's like they're in this society, we are being told that like really the only way to do anything for yourself and make a living for yourself is to go to college and pursue an education. But currently they don't care about us while we're here, and they don't care about having new research and new science that could actually help people. Like all the colleges right now who are looking at cures to different diseases and stuff, they are not going to be able to get funding anytime soon to continue their research to help more people. But still, we have all this money to go to Israel and to go to Iran and to do all these things that our country's currently doing in our administration.
Yeah, after hearing about that actually sounds like pretty sad that though we allocate like this much money to defense, there's actually like tangible examples of people being like unemployed or being laid off due to this frankly absurd defense budget. But yeah, that's just kind of sad. So basically, when you put everything together, there seems to be a pretty consistent pattern I'm seeing here.
Yeah, the government gives money to defense without question, and then it leaves all the other areas with scraps.
And when these areas just lose all that funding, they become privatized, they no longer focus on innovation, like the space industry, or they just fall behind, like all of our social programs in America.
So going back to the beginning, if defense is still getting a vast amount of funding, what are we losing because of that?
All right, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.